All right, guys, we got to start talking measurement here. So I want to introduce you to this tool which we use a lot in science called maybe you know, it is a meter stick. A lot of people want to say it's a yardstick or a measuring stick or something like that. It's definitely not a yardstick. Measuring stick maybe, because it's a stick that we use to measure. But real quick, I want to show you the difference between a yardstick and a meter stick. So I've got one of each here. Let's line up the sticks here. Sorry, I'm working in a weird reverse camera situation here. So the meter stick is on top and the yardstick is on the bottom. So we can see that the meter stick is a little bit longer than the yardstick by a couple of inches. So we've got 36 inches long for our yardstick. And our meter stick, will it focus? Our meter stick actually does have inches on the back. It's about 39, a little bit over 39 inches long. But here's the thing, in science we want to use metric. We do not want to use this yardstick. We call it an imperial system. And there's some good reasons for that. See how this yardstick is split up into 1/2. Sorry, it's not focusing very well. It's split up into 1/2. We've got 3/8. We've got 1/4, we've got 1/8. It's split up into all these weird little units, and the inches themselves are split up into units as well. Those weird fractions, I don't know about you guys, I don't like fractions. I would much rather work with decimals. Well, that's how scientists work, is with decimals, not with fractions. So this yardstick, we don't need it. We're going to pay attention more to our meter stick, okay? So let's take a slightly better look. Sorry, this is not a normal thing for me. I'm getting used to it. So here's our meter stick. It is 1 meter long. That's a pretty common unit of measurement that we're going to see. Things that we would measure in meters would be like the length of a room, maybe the length of the sidewalk from your house to the street, maybe the length of a car. Sometimes we might measure the height of a person in that, although usually you're not really going to have a person over 2 meters tall. Usually we'll stick to centimeters for that measurement. So let's talk then about centimeters. So if this whole big stick is 1 meter, this 1 meter is split into 100 centimeters. So if we look up closer to it, our centimeters, if the camera will focus, are right here. Nope, it's not going to. Whatever, you'll get it. So our centimeters. There we go. If I could just stop moving for a second. Our centimeters are these little marks. You'll see those centimeters are split up even more by those eeny weeny little tick marks. So 100 centimeters. And the meter goes all the way up to 99, and then 100 is right there on the edge. Those little tiniest tick marks then are millimeters. There are 10 millimeters in each centimeter. Okay, so let's start actually measuring some things. I'm going to flip my camera around, and we're going to measure a couple of smallish objects. Before we do that, though, let's talk about when we would use, so we said that we would use meters to measure things like length of room, distance from house to street, maybe length of a car, something like that. Centimeters, what would we use that to measure? Well, we would use that to measure things that are shorter than a meter, but bigger than 1 centimeter, right? We would use them to measure things like maybe the length of, the width of your computer, the height of a book, the length of a pencil. Those would be things that we would measure using centimeters, things that we could probably hold in our hand. Okay? Millimeters then would be measuring things even tinier, like the width of your pencil lead, or the width of a piece of paper, like not the side to side width, but like when you turn the paper sideways, that would be, we would be using, you know, a fraction of a millimeter. So keep in mind that we use different units for measuring different sized things, okay? So we're going to measure some things that we can hold in our hand, which means we're going to be using centimeters for that. So I'm going to flip the camera around. It'll look a little bit crazy here for a second, but we'll get it done. Okay, so I've got my little whiteboard here. I've got a smaller measuring tool because fitting this giant meter stick onto the screen is going to be much more difficult. So I've got this little ruler. You guys might have rulers something like this at your house. If you do, it might not be a bad idea right now to go grab it real quick and do some of your own measuring of some of your own stuff. So here are the things that we need to think about when we're measuring a thing. First off is, what unit do we want to use? Well, since we know that these things, I'm going to measure this pack of sticky notes and I'm going to measure this book. Since these are things that we can hold in our hand, we're going to use centimeters, okay? If I was trying to measure something like the length of my car, I can't hold my car in my hands, so I would use something like meters for that. If I wanted to measure how long my classroom was, I would want to use meters for that because I can't hold my classroom in my hands, okay? But because these objects are a size that we could hold in our hands, we're going to use centimeters, okay? So here are our centimeters. I kind of mentioned it before. In science, we do not use inches. Inches is just not a scientific measurement. We want to stick with our metric system, which would be centimeters. So make sure you're using the correct side of the ruler for one. Next, we need to pay attention to where the units actually start on our ruler. So when you're measuring a thing, say I'm starting to measure this thing of sticky notes, I don't want to start at the end of the ruler because my measurement is going to be off by however much space is between the 0 and the end of the ruler. So we want to make sure that our object is lined up really well with that 0 mark. Okay, so we're lined up, so now we are ready to take our measurement. Now, whenever we're doing our measurement, we want to look straight down onto the object, and so I'm going to slide it over in the camera so that we're looking straight down, as straight as I can get this camera to be looking down on it anyway, straight down onto our object and the ruler. So, I can get a little bit closer even. Bear with me, this is all new stuff for me here. Okay, we'll call it good there. So, I'm going to grab my pointer pencil. When we're measuring the thing, we want to first count how many whole centimeters are there. We already decided we're measuring this in centimeters, and then we're going to use decimals to represent the little tick marks that come afterwards. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 centimeters, point something. And we got to figure out that point something. So I would say that this edge lines up pretty well with this little tick mark right here. Okay. So one great thing about this ruler is that the 5th tick mark is a little bit extended out. So rather than having to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we can just know that that one is 5, and we can just say, okay, 5, 6. So we have 7 centimeters and 6 little tick marks. So that means our measurement would be 7.6 centimeters. Okay, that's how we would write that. Make sure that you always use a unit. In science, we have to use units. If you don't use a unit in science class when you're supposed to use one, I am going to make fun of you endlessly because I will ask you, what would that unit be? Is it 7.6 centimeters, 7.6 millimeters, 7.6 glasses of milk, 7.6 years? What are you talking about? 7.6 what? We need to use units, okay? 7.6 centimeters is how we would write that. This moved a little bit, so that looks like 7.6 centimeters to me. Let's try another object. Gonna get our book. If you haven't read Charlotte's Web, you really should. It's a good book. So we're gonna go ahead and measure this guy. So again, starting out not with the edge of the ruler on the edge of the book, but with the 0 on the edge of the book, okay? And then we're going to slide it over so that we are looking straight above. Oop. Let's do this. Do a little rearranging. Hopefully I don't knock everything off my table here. Yeah, just ignore that. You know, things like that happen in school, right? Okay. So, we're lined up with 0 on the edge there. I promise it's still lined up. So I think our measurement here, oops, I think our best measurement will be 13 point something. And I think it is on the third tick mark over. Okay, 13.123. Okay, so 13.3 centimeters. Again, unit is centimeters. So there's your basic measurement using centimeters and the little millimeter tick marks as the decimal points. That's pretty much what we're going to focus on today, is taking these measurements. A lot of you guys have done this before. This is review. This isn't too difficult for you. For some of you guys it might be a new thing, but I promise once you do a couple of them and get those under your belt, I think things will go a lot easier. Okay. I think that is everything that I wanted to tell you. If you have any questions on anything, please don't hesitate to ask me.